Welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP and you're going to get 10% off your order. With that code FNP at simbody.com, you're really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks ? Kicks.
Well, boy, just like that, we're back and we're getting set for UFC 288 coming up this weekend from Newark, New Jersey. Matt, those pesky Devils are not really doing well in the playoffs right now against the Hurricanes, but listen, the fights, they are sure to heat up that New Jersey area. And when you have a look at this card, I mean, title fight up at the top, co-main event, obviously now it has title implications. Exactly. The winner is going to face the winner of Covington and Edwards. So a lot going on there. Andrade versus Yan Xiaonan. Some possible title implications there. It was really weird at the press conference that they had midweek when they had everybody on the main card there, and poor Lopes was just there, just minding his own business, just sitting there twiddling his thumbs, him and Movsar Evloya. But when you do look at this card overall, I mean, the gosh darn work that us and the other half of the fighters that got bounced off the card, it just sucks the way that you lose some of these fights. Sure. And you work pretty darn hard for it, but you look forward to what's coming up now. Is this card better than one championship Fight Night 10? Yeah, a bit, but man, that was a good card last night. So a lot of stuff going on in the overall world of MMA. Alejandro Chavez joining us over there in the chat. Doughboy Paul, Morphatrix, Aldo Valier. We've got VT, Eric Cote, Craig Hart, Clay. We got
How
VT
we doing, everybody?
saying Sox jersey. Nice, Craig. I wore this one, I think, last week for a good reason.
Have you felt the momentum kind of build throughout the week for Henry Cejudo's return? Because I personally haven't. I know, like, I had said that sort of leading up to the video, right at the start of the week. It was never really that you felt like you were missing him in your life, but now that he is back, I find myself really excited for this main event. I think now everybody does respect the skill set of Aljamain Sterling. He's held the belt for a little while now. It's not just like he won it yesterday. So I do think this is going to be a really tough test for Cejudo coming back, and I do like the whole storyline now of, well, you know, fighters coming back after 35 years old. They're what, 2-38, 2-39? I don't know the specific stat, but they're not doing all that great. So can Henry Cejudo kind of buck that trend and kind of do it for the old guys out there?
And we will see that. I mean, DJ was able to do it in the third fight against Moraes last night. It sucked. It was terrible. Moraes just held the action.
The first two were great.
And did nothing. But I see it over there in the comments section. I'll talk about it a little bit later on. But Abe Froman's son, the Sausage King of Chicago's heir, saying, does anybody think Bilal is hurt or it's a fake picture? If you go and you watch Embedded, I think it's a fourth or fifth episode when they're doing those like video things ahead of the green screen, the front view in the Embedded, you can see that his ankle looks like it's swollen, but then the rear view and everything else, it looks like it's normal. So I have absolutely no idea. I'm just going to assume that it's fine, but I have no idea. But what we always do with Fight Night Picks ? Kicks, we ask you for the like. That one is free. You can hit up the super chat if you'd like, but then we throw it on over to the Fight of the Night screen. And this is where I was going to liken this to something else. I mean, the main event, you know how good it is. This one's for the title. We'll get into the nitty-gritty.
It's going to be a tense fight.
It should be. And I mean, Aljamain Sterling, it's kind of like a hometown type of feel. He's a New York guy. The fight's down in New Jersey. There's only one New Jersey participant on the card, and it sucks. Like, Frankie Edgar retired not that long ago. He didn't get to fight on a New Jersey card. But Phil Hawes, being the New Jersey guy, second fight on the prelims. I'm going to switch it on over, and we'll just talk about this one really quick, because I see it in the comments section already. Drew Dober taking on Matt Frevola. So if you look at this main event's like when you go to a butcher and you get to the butcher, you go to that meat market and you go, I want that thick cut. I don't want that pork belly. I want that nice bacon. This fight here, it's on free TV. This is like when I go to the meat market, like me and my wife did this afternoon, and we get those smoked bacon ends. They're half the price of regular bacon. They taste just as good. You don't have to pay as much for them. That's what this fight is. And I get equally as excited, if not more, about the aspects surrounding this fight because Drew Dober ranked very low in the top 15, but still, it's a shark's den. Do they have dens? It's a shark.
About sharks.
I don't know. It's a
I have a
lion's
friend
den.
who's a marine biologist.
It's a lion's den in that division. So people are excited about it. Frivola all of a sudden off those 2 giant knockout wins gets a big shot even though he's a wrestler.
And these guys are kind of in different parts of the division because Drew Dober has been around in the top 15 for a while now, and he's been one of those names where, okay, is he going to be a top 5, top 10 guy? Maybe not, but he's going to be a difficult fight for pretty much anybody in the division. And for Frivola, personally, I didn't sell all of my stock into him, but it was a rough ride for him, right? We were seeing his limitations on the feet that he has, of course, been able to improve on as of late. So for Frivola, I think this is going to be not only the biggest win of his career, but if he beats Drew Dober, that's the one that's really going to help him break through and become a household name in the division. And it should be a great fight, too. When you have one of those fight of the nights on a pay-per-view card, it's one of those ones that gets like Joe Rogan talking about you for no reason. He'll be like, hey, remember Drew Dober fought Matt Frivola? And that does get your name out there.
Remember Uroš Medic when he was able to get that knockout?
He was a big deal for what, 3 weeks?
Yeah, it didn't last all that long. Over there in the comments section, I mean, King AJ's hanging out, Mark, we got Eldar, just a lot of people tuning in so far. So keep the comments rolling. If this is your first time here with Question Mark Kicks, we thank you. If it's not, we thank you as well. But what we always do with the show, we start at the bottom of the card, work our way all the way back up to the top. And of course, I mean, my notes, Matt, like I'm looking through the start.
I was going to say 40% of them are probably useless.
Santos versus Munoz Jr., we can turf that one. Estevam versus Zhumagulov, we can turf that one. There were a lot.
Thoughts on the haircut of Zhumagulov?
Listen, I mean, you're going...
If you had a daughter, and if a guy showed up asking to take her out with that haircut, what would your reaction be?
It'd be, I can't say it due to the profanity, but it'd be bub. It wouldn't be bud. It'd be bub. Get the out. Like,
Wow.
just cut the crap here, pal. Matt, but at the start of the card, we do have a guy with some colorful hair taking on Claudio Ribeiro. Matt, we get to pop that one out. I mean, listen, Detective Crashmore gets to make it because Joseph Holmes came in at 189 pounds. Now, he tweeted that before he even stepped in on the scale, before the weigh-ins even started. So it was a really weird situation there. You had the weight miss there from Joseph Holmes, and now you have him taking on Claudio Ribeiro. And for Claudio, I talked about it at the start of the week. I referenced the Sean Bitter article from Cage Side Press before Ribeiro fought over on Dana White's Contender Series. I mean, Sean, in his own words, didn't really see a giant future for Claudio. And when I watched Claudio's regional tape, neither did I. Malone Hart with the giant super chat.
The real MVP this week.
Just sat down to enjoy this 3-course meal of knowledge. Where is it?
There's no, like, Ferrari and bookshelf in the back.
There.
Knowledge.
I mean, the MVP of the show right there. The other trophies
Thank
on
you
the
very
other
much,
side of the
Malone Hart.
office.
That's very kind.
Many, many thanks to Malone Hart. Matt, when you do look at this fight, though, Joseph Holmes misses the weight. Claudio, I didn't have the highest ceiling on him when he came into the UFC. He landed some nice leg kicks.
We've said that about him, but is it fair to say the same about Joseph Holmes, though? Like, I don't think Holmes is going to go on to have some crazy high ceiling either.
I'll say this.
This is a very volatile fight from both fighters' standpoints.
I like the fundamentals out of Joseph Holmes. I like the jiu-jitsu out of Joseph Holmes. The only times we've seen Holmes struggle in professional mixed martial arts has been against some of the wrestling and some of the actual jiu-jitsu of his opponents. But when it comes to facing a striker, Holmes has kind of gotten through unscathed. So for me, Joseph Holmes, I mean, I trying to project
I just
a
don't
really
think
high
either guys
ceiling,
do.
it is difficult. But when you look at a guy like Claudio, I mean, again, Claudio's one of those guys. He throws really big hooks. He throws really big leg kicks. Majority of them at Fight Night Picks over there on Instagram. 64% have Claudio Ribeiro to get the win. I was surprised it was actually that close.
So
but
am I.
when I look at a matchup like this, again, for Claudio, the background, it's in boxing and dancing. And when you watch him out there, the footwork's pretty good. The cardio can get slowed down. And the reason being is because Claudio likes to go up and clinch folks. Like we had, and I think I said it at the start of the week, like you had in the first fight of the night on last weekend's card, Haley Cowan. She just likes to press her opponents up against the cage and not get the takedown. Claudio's not the very best wrestler in the entire world, but he does like to kind of stall things out. That's a position where Holmes could take over. So we'll see how this one is going. But, I mean, for me, I do have Claudio ever so slightly, but it's pretty much a pop and popcorn for me.
It definitely is. I just think he's going to land the slightly cleaner shots at distance. It's kind of like what I said about that horse fight, too. Like, I just thought her 5 or 6 more significant strikes might kind of put the fight in her favor. This fight should be an exciting one, though, because both guys are striking in the center of the cage. I don't think it's going to be boring by any means whatsoever. I do have Claudio in the matchup just because I do think he's a little bit more explosive in some of those exchanges.
Claudio opened a -190, got as low as a -215. He's a -171, so that has come back up on Joseph Holmes in the matchup. Again, let us know who you have here. Waji Omer. Let's go, Allen Brothers. Much appreciated to tune in, and thank you on this Saturday, Matt. So Ikram Aliskerov's only loss. It was a back and forth like minute and a bit, and then all of a sudden, close in uppercut from Hamzat Chimaev, down like a sack of potatoes. Like Bud the Spud from the Bright Red Mud.
Down goes Ikram!
Yeah, so...
They didn't have that call. But...
You had Ikram hitting the mat, but ever since then, he's continued to win. Now, I know his last couple of fights, they're kind of a tale of two fights. His last time out, he looked really impressive. He got the finish win over Mario Souza. Ate some kicks for his troubles, but once he closed the distance, he was able to get it down to the mat and get the finish. The fight before that against UFC vet Nishan Burrell. James Daly, shout out to Six God. Aljo by round 3 TKO?
If he does, then you're going to look like a genius. That would be really interesting, because that's not something I've thought about, if I'm being honest. Like, I think he could submit Henry Cejudo. I do. He's that good at jiu-jitsu. He could win by decision. He doesn't have crazy pop in his shots, but how crazy would that be to see, like, Aljamain hurts him, gets him with a big flurry? That'd be really cool.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
You.
And I'm trying to figure out what ZAR is. Tell me what that is. ZAR. I have no idea. I apologize. I'm not worldly. But when I do look at a fight like this, Matt, you talk about worldliness. I mean, Ikram Aliskerov, he's a 4-time Combat Sambo world champ. He was able to really just boost those accolades, really start into that MMA career on a fresh note and have that great basis in the martial arts. When you look at a guy like Phil Hawes, wrestling in the back pocket, D3 All-American, moved all the way up to D1. He's really got good takedown defense in MMA. The only thing that causes Phil Hawes issues is sometimes his chin leaves him a little bit out there. We saw that against Chris Curtis. We've seen that against I guess it
all
was,
of his fights.
Well, yeah, Julian Marquez. Like, he has had some really tough fights. However, with Phil Hawes, when he goes out there and he wrestles, he has a lot of success. And again, if he can keep it standing and work in some of those boxing combinations, who knows? We saw Phil Hawes for this camp training at Tiger Muay Thai, which again is kind of a double-edged sword. We have stepping out your Pumas, or on your Pumas, saying Burns en route to the belt, round 4 or 5 sub. That is a 5-round fight, so that one's kind of crazy. And when it does come to, I'm sorry I can't pronounce that. That's a different language. Much appreciated. Much appreciated for, yeah, exactly. The old super chat. If it was in French, I get it, but other than that, in English, I don't know. When it comes down to this fight, though, Matt, I know, again, we're split on the pick, and I have it like, I had a hard time.
It is a really close fight. I just worry about what's going to give Phil Hawes the most success is also going to get him hurt in this fight. Because if he is having a lot of success on the feet, which we have seen him do in the UFC, it's just going to make him that much more available to be hit. Now, for Aliskerov, on the back foot, he does have good straight shots down the middle. He's not going to really wow you with any of his volume. He's not like a Calvin Kattar type, but I do like the straight shots, and I think that might be enough to keep Phil Hawes from being that really aggressive version of himself. Now, and you mentioned it, Phil Hawes has great defensive wrestling. It is a very big part of his game. So if Ikram does find himself just going for a lot of kind of wasted takedown attempts, I could see him starting to tire as this fight goes on, and maybe Phil Hawes can start to hit him with some big shots, but I am going to go with Ikram in the matchup. I do like his jab. I do like some of those straight shots. I'm just going to be really interested to see some of the grappling between these two, because I'm not sure who's going to have a big advantage, because I do think Phil Hawes is going to do a great job defensively, especially with his takedown.
And that's it. I mean, Tristan is saying, I think Ikram's combat sambo will prevail, and it very well could, guys. Like, the reason why I have a hard time, and I mean, I said it at the start of the week, and I'll say it again, Diego Gonzalez was very long in the tooth, and he landed that great knee, did Ikram, that was able to then get on top and finish him by ground and pound. Dennis Tululin, there wasn't much of a threat in that fight. He was able to work the striking, push Dennis back, and then take him down. I know Dennis is now in the UFC, and somehow he's won some fights, but he is a rock'em sock'em guy. Nishan Burrell, he just kind of held him against the cage and held him down. And again, if the fight goes the way of that fight, and I see Pablo hitting up the super chat, Super Sage is the GOAT. I have Bilal and Aljo, by the way. For me, the reason why I have Phil Hawes, again, if it's anywhere like the Nishan Burrell fight or like the Mario Souza fight where he gets a takedown, I just don't see it being that easy, and I see Phil Hawes landing some of those bigger shots. So, At Fight Night Picks, quick before we move on, we'll go with those total votes. And again, 62% going with Ikram Aliskerov. He is the favorite in the matchup. But this should be a really, really fun fight. Hawes is already 4-2 in the UFC, and Ikram's like, they're throwing him right into the fire.
Exactly. It's one of those things where, like, I can't blame you for not picking Ikram, but it's one of those, if I'm not believing in you now, if you beat Phil Hawes, there's not really questions afterwards. Because that's a really difficult guy to face in your debut. Like, again, Phil Hawes has been there and done that, so if he goes out there and beats Hawes, then he is going to get a pretty big name next time out.
Yeah, the winner gets poor Brad Tavares. Bub Collins hitting up the Super Chat. Super Chat's on fire so far.
Thank you guys. Goodness.
Sorry I'm late to the party. Let's get into it. Much appreciated. Just my 2 cents. Aliskerov for me, but I'm passing. So, Matt, so there's 2 fights on this card that people just hate our guts for. This is one, and the co-main event's the other one. And when it comes down to this one, I mean, everybody's on Braxton Smith. And I'm going to say something that I didn't say at the start of the week that I thought about and I didn't mention when we were doing this video. I said, so Braxton Smith, he had that long layoff 2014 to last year. He fought Chase Sherman, wasn't really in the best of the space, took the fight, and then took these fights in 2022. And they weren't against the greatest level of competition, but he's absolutely dusting the guys. And we touched on it a little bit. He can be on the front foot and land these power punches and get the finish. What are you doing?
He puts his chin
out, but when he lands these, he's like, they're off of his power. Like, you know how you get a lot of torque when you rotate your body into a punch? He's not. He's all the way on his front foot, and then he throws his arm out there. This guy has unworldly power. So I didn't mention that at the start of the week, and I wish I did to give him his shine. But I was kind of surprised that many people had Braxton Smith. Now, it's a South African Rand. So, James, I appreciate the super chat the second time backing our guy, Duplessis. It'll be interesting to see.
That's going to be a big fight.
That Whitaker fight is a big fight. So, when it does come down to this fight, Matt, there's 2 giant things.
Thank you, James, by the way.
Braxton Smith, UFC debut, and this is a guy that was self-trained for all of last year. This is his first time with the camp. He went down to San Antonio to train for this one. He's from Austin, and after the fight, he's going to go back to Austin. That from an interview with JHK. But when it comes down to this fight, Parker Porter came in underweight compared to where he was the last time and physically looked really good. Big smile on his face. So when it does come down to this one, I see Goku saying Peter Parker Porter. Parker! But when it comes down to this one, I mean, are we going to be saying Porter by the end of the
He could easily get knocked out. And again, this fight really does come down to, for how long can he be elusive until he doesn't have to be? Because if he can avoid that big shot, especially early on, and Braxton Smith does start to slow down, his punches are quite telegraphed. It's what we've mentioned a lot. He leads with his chin a little bit. He will leap into his punches. So if you're a guy with huge power, I know Francis isn't in the UFC right now, but you get the idea. If you fight like that against Francis, it's going to end very, very poorly for you. But he could easily land forward, do one of those flurries, hit Porter with a big shot, and it could be over in, 2 minutes? But the other 13 minutes of this fight, I do favor Porter in. I do like his steadiness in the heavyweight division. Now, could he get caught kind of like a deer in headlights? Could he get frozen standing up? He, of course, could, and the fight will be over if that does happen. I still like him in the other areas, though. So, for Braxton Smith, if he can go out there and beat Porter, then he's going to prove a lot to me personally. But I do have Porter in this match.
56% of the fans going with Braxton Smith over on our Instagram, at Fight Night Picks in the story. When it does come down to this one, again, Braxton's kind of said, listen, the people don't know what I'm all about, and how would you? Because he's knocking guys out in the first. His longest fight's 2 minutes and 3 seconds, so he knocks guys dead very, very quick. And for Parker Porter, the good thing for Braxton Smith, he weighs less, and he got finished in his last fight against Justin Tafel, where he decided to strike, and he didn't mix his martial arts. So I do have Parker Porter in the matchup. Alex Clark's hanging out. I saw Branch above a little bit earlier. Pablo making fun of, your unfortunate slip of the tongue there. Not in this video, but the Justin Tafel video where you mixed first name, last name, and that one was just rough.
So, I have him in this fight, though, so if he watches, hopefully there's no hard feelings.
Well, both of us going with Parker Porter in the matchup. Now we get into our next one, Matt. Marina Rodriguez taking on Virna Jandiroba. And so when it does come down to this matchup, I know we made this a little bit of a shorter video, but Virna, kind of similar to some of the fighters that we have on this card, just like a Bilal Muhammad, Vina's gotten better with her hands. Now, it is a lot of 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2 takedown attempt, and she is somebody that's going to try and grab the clinch to go for like a bodyweight takedown like Chrome Gracie will later on in this card. Now, I see Crick saying Marina Rodriguez all the way, and you asked a question up earlier, do you watch some of those other UFC? I don't watch a lot of picks and breakdown show. By a lot, I don't. I try and clear my mind of MMA when I'm not doing MMA, which is most of the time. So it's a lot of baseball, a lot of hockey. So when it does, hopefully that answers your questions. When it does come down to this one, Matt, Virna, we know how good she is. We know that she dropped Amanda Hebos, and we know that Marina Rodriguez finished Amanda Hebos. But when it comes down to this one, Marina had a really rough time out her last time. Virna beat somebody that strikes similar to Marina, who's fighting next weekend in a similar match. I mean, Mackenzie Dern's taking on Angela Hill. But in this one, it's kind of similar to that fight as well.
It is, but Marina's tuned up like a lot of notches. I think that's fair to say. I have a really hard time with this matchup, though, because Virna is so well-rounded in her game, and if she is able to have any success on the feet, well, I favor her a lot on the mat. So unless Marina's really heavily favored in a lot of the striking exchanges, then I could see a world where Virna's able to go out there and look really well. But I go back to a matchup that happened in the strawweight division years ago. Remember when Joanna fought Carla the first time for the belt, and she lit her up at range so much to where Carla didn't really want to go on the inside and go for a lot of those takedown attempts? I think Marina could fight a similar fight. Now, I don't think she's going to go out there and dominate to the level that Joanna did in that matchup, but I like her with the jab. I like her with the straight shots a lot more. I know Virna was able to drop Amanda Hebos, but I still think Marina's the more heavy-handed out of the two and the more damaging striker out of these two, and I think she can really make Virna pay for some of those outside striking. So unless Virna is able to get on top a lot in this matchup, I do favor Rodriguez in the fight, and that's why I have her in the pick.
I mean, in the matchup at Fight Night Picks on our Instagram story, 65% going with Marina Rodriguez. I think the volume can be a deterrent. We've seen Marina fight quite a few grapplers in the past. I know even Amanda Lemos, you look at the finish, and she finishes her standing, but if you look at it in the second round, Amanda was able to get the fight down to the mat and have a lot of success, and Marina wasn't able to get back up. And I see Morphitrix comment, but when you look at somebody like Marina, it kind of goes together with what Ice Viking had said in the fact that Marina struggled against Carla Esparza with the takedown. She struggled against Randa Marcos.
She's done a great job getting back up
with the takedown. So a lot of fighters that are going to go freestyle wrestling, single leg, double leg, you can have a lot of trouble. Virna's not necessarily one of those fighters, but she is very heavy when she goes for the takedown. So both of us going with Marina Rodriguez. Go with a fighter from Brazil in this one. You're not going to get it wrong.
Exactly.
How about that one? So both of us in agreement on this fight. And now we move into another one. Now, I noticed today that I made a mistake, but it wasn't that big of a mistake. But I made a mistake in the graphic for this fight. And I put down that Rolando Bedoya was from Brazil. And the slip of the mind was he trains at Shoot the Box Diego Lima. As I said, he's a ride or die, just getting bleached with the boys in the sauna. But he's actually from Peru, so I made sure that I switched it here to give the man the credit that he deserves. And he's got 14 wins, split evenly between decisions and finishes. And when you look at him in a matchup like this against Khaos Williams, the big question mark is, does Khaos turn it on tonight? That really is the question. I mean, is the light going to be on when the DoorDash driver shows up? Is it going to be there? Or are we going to just have to wait and wait and wait and see what happens? Is it going to be stalemate? I don't know. But I know for Rolando Bedoya, the guy likes to march forward, and that can get him caught, but it just, to me, it depends on which Williams shows up.
But that's the exciting thing. The way Rolando fights should draw the fight out of Khaos Williams, and that'll be the best case scenario for all of the fans watching at home, because if Khaos does decide to let his hands go, we should be in for an insane fight at welterweight, because I've been a big, maybe not believer in Khaos Williams, but I gotta be honest, I did a big 180 with my mindset on him. You looked at his resume coming into the UFC, you kind of laughed at his level of competition. He was beating guys the way he was supposed to beat them, but he never really beat anyone of substance on his way up until he got to the UFC.
And then he dusted Alex Morono.
It was like, oh, if he just walks forward, moves his hands, guys can't really, withstand his power whatsoever. So I do think this is kind of one of those get back on the horse type of matchups. Again, Rolando could go on and have a very successful career. I just think this is one of those too much too soon matchups against a guy like Williams. You're right. Could Williams be that low output version of himself? He definitely could be. But even if he is, the low output he's throwing still has some pretty devastating impact behind it.
And I'm going to deviate a little bit because I see it right there from Lightning saying this main card could be a fight night, but the prelims could be a fight night card too. That's a really weird thing. And I know
I like the co-main event.
We slag the UFC when some of their fights aren't the greatest, but next weekend, I mean, the fight night card's actually
it's a
pretty
really good one. Yeah, there's 8 or 9 quality fights on that card that you can easily get excited for. I was looking through the tabology today before we were doing this, and I'm really excited for that card. The co-main event is Anthony Smith versus Johnny Walker. That's easily a main event for a fight night card, so it should be a really fun card.
So Kurtar makes a great point in the comment section. Did I do the Rolling Stones part? Because I mean, it's just Keith Richards, and then does he go? And in some of the fights that he's had, the Randy Brown fight, the Semmelsberger fight, we're waiting for the violence, and it's harder to do it when it's not in the first minute. But what he's shown is a better gas tank than you would have
good
thought.
fighters, too.
And he's been able to really get moving. So I do have Khaos Williams in the matchup. I'll bring it up at Fight Night Picks so we can get the total number. 86% going with Williams in this one. For Rolando Bedoya, I mean, good when he switches stances. He smiles a lot when he gets hit. He's like Sebastian Katastam last night against Soldich before he knocked him out. We'll see how this one goes. But does Bedoya have any wrestling or ground game? He has decent wrestling. He has pretty good jiu-jitsu. I mean, coming out of a striking gym. But again, for me, I'll go with Williams because I find Bedoya is a little bit hittable.
I would agree.
We have a look at a light heavyweight fight. And again,
It's a fun one.
Smith versus Walker's the co-main event next weekend. Kennedy and Nzechukwu taking on Devin Clark. Outside of the top 15, but we're very, very close to ranked. And when you do look at a fight like this, I mean, Kennedy and Nzechukwu, he's turned it on lately. He's kind of gotten away from some of those bad habits. And even in his last fight, I mean, he gets taken down by Ion Kutsalaba really early on. He gets held down and he tries to hold down in like a mission control type of position. He then gets back up to his feet down the round. And then in the second round, when Ion decides, I'm just going to throw the kitchen sink at him on the feet very tiredly. That's where Kennedy's able to pull away. For Devin Clark, we saw a reversal in his last fight because his second to last fight against Murzakanov, every left hand and then that right to the body was able to just starch Clark. And Murzakanov looked amazing. But Clark, his last time out, he wrestled, looked like his old self. And Clark beat Jung and Kennedy lost to Jung. So, I mean, listen, MMA math, Devin Clark wins. But this is another one of those fights. This is another one of those fights where you're on one side, you're on the other side. I mean, James Daly, unrelated by DDP versus Whitaker. What do you guys think? Do you think that Dricus du Plessis is overrated, but I feel like he's a live dog against Rob? Maybe that nasal surgery really did change him. They forgot where I came from.
It's going to be a really fun fight because, again, Robert Whitaker's like the de facto number one contender and has been for 3 years now. So if you beat him, you automatically fight for the title. It's going to be weird trying to beat Whitaker, though, for 5 rounds because du Plessis so erratic with his fighting. We're like, how do you beat someone who's really erratic? Well, you just have really good fundamentals. What does Robert Whitaker have? Really good fundamentals. So it's a difficult fight, but if he beats Robert Whitaker, then he can beat anybody.
Dricus has good offensive wrestling, but he has bad defensive wrestling. And I know how good he looked against Darren Till, but I think Whitaker's a little bit different when it comes to that wrestling aspect. That's just me, but when it does come down to this matchup, Matt, at 205 pounds, I know we're split on this one, and honest to God, people are pissed in the comments all week because, oh, you guys are different on all these picks. I forgot about it. I thought we were pretty similar on most of them, but we're actually not. So when it comes down to this one, yes, I agree. Could Kennedy go out there and absolutely knock out Devin Clark? 100%. Devin Clark, typically,
doesn't love getting hit.
Through his UFC career, hasn't really beaten the good guys, but he's beaten the guys outside of the top 15, and he's had a lot of success when he closes the space, which is what Kennedy needs to use. That's why I have Devin Clark to get the win. I like the Kennedy's like Chumbawamba, gets knocked down, but he always gets back up again. So it's going to be a tricky fight, but I still do like Devin Clark.
And I could see Clark having a lot of success with his wrestling, but I think that's going to be the key to his game in this matchup, unless he's landing a lot of leg kicks on the outside. I don't know if his boxing's good enough to have a ton of success against Kennedy, just because when Kennedy gets moving downhill, it is tough to deal with him. He's throwing a lot of volume. He has accurate strikes, too, and he'll go to the body. It's just a lot to deal with.
Devin Clark doesn't do great against head kicks, especially from southpaws. Kennedy's orthodox, but Kennedy has a really good head kick.
And he's like 9 feet tall, too, doing head kicks. It's kind of wild how athletic he is, just for the size of him. But I do like Nzechukwu just, again, for the overall striking aspect of his game. I'm surprised to see where the votes are on Instagram.
83% of the fans going with Kennedy and Nzechukwu. I already said it at the start of the week. I'm 3-4 in picking Devin Clark fights in the last 7. I'm 3-3 with Kennedy and Nzechukwu fights. So I have a hard time with both of these guys. But we're split on that pick. We'll move on forward. Matt, our next fight.
I like this one.
Matt, the Steamroller Frivola Fight Night Picks 2022 Most Improved Fighter of the Year. He knocked down Gerardo Valdez, accredited 4 times. I counted 6. And when
it was a beatdown.
When he went out there against Potato Gata Zaitsar, I was listening again. This is a little bit of like breaking down the fourth wall inside baseball. Listening to Milky Chance before the video, like those German fellas, they get the music. And Matt, for a guy that represents Germany occasionally, Otman Zaitsar, he gets starched against Matt Frivola.
He
so
did.
You look at a matchup like this, Matt. I see the fight of the nights that are out there. I agree with that, and I think it's going to be a fight of the night. Drew Dober struggles against wrestlers when they wrestle. But when they strike, he
lights
does
them
very
up.
well, except for Olivier Aubin-Mercier. But when you look at this matchup, Matt, again, split on the pick, but I love the fight.
Oh, it's a phenomenal fight, and we are probably going to get a lot of striking out of Frivola early on in the matchup, and that's why it easily could be a fight of the night. Because if he goes out there and wrestle, I don't doubt that he could have a lot of success. Because Drew Dober doesn't have great takedown defense. He's good at scrambling, though. He is good at getting back up to his feet if you're not like an Islam Makhachev type. So I don't think it's going to be a case of, oh, if Frivola gets him down, he's just going to win that round with his top control. I think he's going to have to work for the takedown a little bit more. But the only thing that worries me about picking Drew Dober in this matchup is, could Drew Dober just get old overnight? And I don't mean that in a sense of he's an old fighter, but just could the damage be wearing on him? Because I have said this.
Well,
remember when Luque fought Jeff Neal? It was, hey, I know he's never been knocked out before, and that's been a big part of his storyline up until that point. But Jeff Neal, if anyone's going to knock him out, could be that guy, even though I picked Luque in the fight. I can admit that. Matt Frivola sits down on his punches, and he lands big power shots. So if he's able to sit down on a big hook, land on Drew Dober, and knock him out, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I just think Dober can land his own damaging strikes as a consequence of Matt Frivola maybe overthrowing with some of his power shots. And that's why I do have Dober in the matchup. And this is going to be a great fight.
Now, again, when it does come down to this fight, for me to pick Matt Frivola, and for me to pick these wrestlers in fights against strikers, I assume in my brain that they're going to wrestle, but that doesn't always happen. It does sometimes, and you look smart, but when it doesn't, you look like a turkey. And when you look at it, I mean, Curtis Blades taking on Pavlovich. We'll just wrestle Curtis. And then after striking for so long, tasting the power, then he goes for kind of like an across-the-cage takedown, gets bucked off, and then that's it. Like, we're fish out of water. We're in trouble now. So when I look at a fight like this, I know that Matt Frivola's had a lot of success with the boxing in the last two fights, but I think training in Tampa with Billy Q, training with Aljamain and Merab Dvalishvili, it's going to well condition him for a fight like this. Merab, I mean, get yourself a hype man like Merab Dvalishvili. When it comes down to the fan vote, 78% going with Drew Dober in this matchup. Again, I look back to that fight against Aubin-Mercier, who was a southpaw, but was able to drop Dober in the first round. And then second round, third round, it was a lot of his wrestling that was able to get him going. For those reasons, I like Frivola.
Very close fight.
I know where 78% of our Instagram have Dober to win. There seems to be a lot of people in the comment section that actually have Matt Frivola. So it's fun to see that the comments there, the competition for sure. And that moves us on to the main card. Now, Matt, I had a video that came out this week, and it was the most successful video in keeping score history. And that's because of you guys. So thank you so much for checking that one out. It was called The Jiu-Jitsu Magician Returns about Kron Gracie. Now, people were like, why did he move his gym? Because I didn't talk about it in the video. Look into it. But when you look at it for Kron Gracie, he doesn't like doing media day. He likes giving short answers.
I'm only here so I don't get fined.
Yeah, he's a little bit like a former running back for the Seahawks. So for Kron Gracie...
Marshawn Lynch Voldemort?
Again, no, I just couldn't think of Marshawn Lynch's name. There's so much MMA going through my brain right now, Matt. But when you look at a guy like Kron Gracie, you got to go back through and watch his fights. You got to watch the fight that he had against Alex Caceres, performance of the night. It was just over 2 minutes. He was able to get the submission, and then he goes in and has a fight of the night against Cub Swanson. He tried to pull guard in that fight, and he wasn't successful with it.
There were some ugly takedown attempts there at some point.
His boxing, he doesn't cut the cage with his boxing, but he does throw big enough shots that it kind of like stuns his opponent. It's not into the head, but it like makes them think, and then they become reactive, and that's where he has some success with it. But when you look at a guy like Kron Gracie, again, the Kawajiri fight, the Takoro fight, the fights that he had with Ryzen, and the one organization that wasn't Ryzen before that, I mean, out of those fights, he went, 4-0? He had 4 guard pulls and 2 takedowns by getting a guy on the back and just pulling dead body weight down to the mat, which were things that he was able to do in pure jiu-jitsu. So when you look at a guy like Kron Gracie, taking on a guy who's decent at offensive grappling, but not great at defensive, and Charles Jourdain, it makes it really tough.
It is a really difficult fight to predict, because Charles Jourdain on his worst day could lose to a guy coming off Contender Series. I think that's fair to say. On his best day, though, could have a fight of the night with someone on, like, the borderline of the top 15.
Like, the guy went to Busan, South Korea, against Busan Zone, Doo-Ho Choi, and knocked him out in the second round and got a performance bonus.
But that's the big thing that I think about in this fight. Yes, the jiu-jitsu of Gracie is going to be a big talking point, but I think it comes down to his pressure and how much pressure can Charles Jourdain withstand. Because if he does start to wilt at any point during this fight, then it's just going to make him that much more available to get taken down.
Craig Hart, I know that the man's original last name isn't necessarily Gracie, but there's one kind of thing that goes against that, Naaman over with Bellator is some pretty good takedowns.
Well, he's the only one, though. For the most part, it's just jiu-jitsu heavy.
So when you look at a matchup like this,
for Kron Gracie, if the pressure's able to get to Jourdain, because Jourdain does need distance to land his own strikes. So that's the thing. If Kron is really aggressive, gets into the clinch, uses the dirty boxing, I still think Jourdain's the better striker, don't get me wrong, but is going to give him less opportunities to land strikes in the ranges where he does like to land strikes. So I could see this going in favor of Kron Gracie. I just think Jourdain's going to really make him pay for a lot of those takedown attempts.
And it is a tough one if you're trying to make a pick. When somebody hasn't fought in 1,302 days, like, this is one that if you get it right, great. I mean, fine, just look past it. And if you get it wrong, what does it really tell you? So for me, I do have Jourdain with the striking on the outside. Again, southpaw body kick, head kick, orthodox leg kick boxing. When you look at it for Jourdain, 64% on our Instagram have him to get the win. Queen of Boudica Radiant. Kron has super dark energy. I like it. Yeah, it's weird. I learned how to chop wood and shovel a driveway. I guess those are things you don't really need to know in California.
That's a good point.
Especially Southern California. But
Brunswick, Canada.
I found it weird, though, that he dressed like it was winter in Montana when he went to New Jersey, which is probably pretty tepid right now. Like, the weather's pretty good.
Probably great in New Jersey.
Yeah, it's just you move to Montana, you forget what the rest of the country
You become a different man.
Yeah, he's changed.
You start wearing thick leather coats.
They said, I should have forgot where it came from. Matt, when you look at this matchup, Movsar was supposed to take on Bryce Mitchell. We made a video about
fight
it.
I was very excited
The fight, just out there into thin air, and all of a sudden, on Tuesday, Diego Lopes takes the fight on short notice. He makes weight. How about that? He makes the weight. So you do like to see that. When it comes down to this fight, I mean, let us know who you have in the comments section. I
think I know who they have.
I know a lot of people are going to take Movsar. Diego Lopes isn't a prospect. He's 21-5. He's 28 years old. He's past the prospect stage. He's beaten good fighters. He's beaten 3 former UFC vets, finished them all in that order. He goes over to Contender Series, and he gets out-wrestled by Joe Anderson Brito. And in the third round, he lands a jab. Brito lands an eye poke, which he was already warned about, a hard warning by Chris Tognoni. But the fight goes to a technical decision, and Brito wins. So for Lopes, he goes back down in the regional scene, loses the split decision to Nate Richardson. I thought he won 2 of the first 3 rounds, and then when it went to round 4 and round 5, it was just a really close fight in general. But I thought overwhelmingly he won 2 of 3, and Richardson's a good fighter. So for me, I look at Diego Lopes. What does he do well? Walks guys down with his hands up, throws a really good leg kick out of an orthodox stance, throws together really good boxing combinations. He'll dig to the body, he'll go up top, he'll leave himself out there a little bit sometimes. His defensive wrestling is pretty good. His offensive wrestling is with a lot of power. It's just against Movsar.
It's a tough
hill. He could stick in a guillotine. He could go for an armbar. He goes for good triangle chokes off his back. He's very, very active. And again, that's why I worry about Movsar just like I did after and before the Nick Lentz fight. So, listen, Onglan Sung in the post fight, he gets that knockout, he gets a submission win, and then he goes, Sean Soriano, Nick Lentz, thank you. So Nick Lentz getting the shouts at one championship last night. When you look at a fight like this, Matt, Movsar is very good.
I have him in this fight, yeah.
And I have a hard time picking Diego Lopes in the fight.
This fight is one of those, hey, hopefully we can learn more about Diego moving forward. Because if he can make this a competitive fight, it could be a loss where you gain a lot of stock in just the general fan's mind. But it's a really difficult fight for him. Like, you're fighting someone who's extremely well-rounded, who doesn't get hit by a ton of clean shots, who has really good offensive wrestling, and who can hold guys down, too. And I just think that's going to be really difficult for Lopes to try to get over.
And the other weird thing, and I see Pablo saying this is one that gives me Parlay Buster vibes. It's weird, like, minus 1,000 is scary for sure. It's pop and popcorn. But when you look at this for Diego Lopes, one positive that he has, which rarely ever happens, orthodox striker Movsar was getting ready for the southpaw in Bryce Mitchell, whose striking's progressed, but it's not to the level of a guy like Diego Lopes. So both of us going with Movsar in the matchup, the master of sport in Greco-Roman wrestling. We'll see how that plays out for him in this matchup. Former M1 global champ. And then we move into Andrade versus Yan Xiaonan.
A really fun fight.
People think that we collude in our picks and we just figure things out before we film. We don't watch tape together. Just newsflash. And we're not really making the picks with each other. So I was surprised that you took Yan Xiaonan. I think you were surprised that I took Andrade.
Yeah, we did the old Uno reverse card.
Yeah, that was kind of funny.
But I think we both see where the other one's coming from. Again, I agree with everything you said. Could Jessica Andrade march her down, hit her with the biggest left hook you've ever seen and knock her out? Yeah. Easily. Could she lift her up over her head, slam her down with like the might of Thor, and then knock her out? Yes, all those things could happen.
You go back to an earlier fight. Drew Dober's taking on Matt Frevola. Look at Drew Dober's knockout win that he had against Bobby Green, who was throwing the kitchen sink of volume at him. Dober couldn't cut the cage. Green's moving on his way out. Dober throws one of those Hail Mary shots, and it lands on Green's chin, and he drops him. When you look at a fight like this, Andrade taking on Yan Xiaonan. Yan Xiaonan backs away the same way, and Jessica Andrade throws similar punches. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but
the difference is,
there's similarities.
Jessica doesn't throw with a lot of power when she's moving her feet chasing. When she plants her feet, yes, she has more power than anybody in this weight class. So I just don't know if she's going to have the opportunity to land those crippling shots that she is known for. And for Yan Xiaonan, it was kind of difficult for me to really be convinced that she was kind of a legit contender. But what does she do well? Pretty much everything. Like, she doesn't have a lot of weaknesses in her game, and I do think that goes a very long way, because let's say Jessica Andrade is more of the fighter we saw in the Erin Blanchfield fight than she is the fighter we saw in name any of her classic legendary fights, because she has had a number of them. Then that's a fighter who could get picked apart on the back foot by someone like Yan Xiaonan.
Just my 2 cents. Yan has fought a better fighter. Yan's fought a fighter who's won the title twice. Won the title after that, so...
I don't know if she's fought a better fighter than Andrade. To be fair, Andrade might be one of the greatest women's fighters of all time.
Carla Esparza's a 2-time champ.
Jessica's way better than Carla.
It is what it is, man. In this matchup, again, I kind of err on the side of Clay, saying the physicality difference should be night and day.
I agree with that.
I don't know what the odds are on this fight. I assume Andrade is the favorite.
I think so, by a good amount.
She is the favorite. Andrade minus 175 at open, minus 182 right now. And if we have a look at Fight Night picks for the total votes on this one, I assume that they're going to be pretty close. 62% going with Jessica Andrade. Again, why do I like Yan Xiaonan in general, but I don't necessarily have her in this fight? It's because of that big fundamental. It's because of the nice 1-2, the nice leg kick, defensive wrestling. In the majority of her fights, good offensive wrestling. The only fight that kind of goes against that is the one that she had against Carla Esparza. So for me, I do have Jessica Andrade, but again, as Justin Frank says, Yan is fast. She's really fast, and she can usually back out and circle away from any issue and danger in a lot of her fights too.
Even when Andrade beat Lauren Murphy just stood there in front of her, and Jessica Andrade held her hands down by her waist and just like threw the kitchen sink at her. Yan's not going to be there to be hit like Lauren Murphy. So I think it's going to be a really difficult matchup for Andrade. But again, I've said this many times. Andrade is a Hall of Famer. I think she's one of the greatest women's fighters of all time. I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if she won this fight, but I do have Yan Xiaonan.
AG, Yan training with Song Yadong, boys. Yeah, and Chad Mendes trains there, and so does Darren Elkins. A lot of good fighters.
Is such a good fighter.
A Team Alpha Male Matt. The next fight, we have Bilal Muhammad taking on Gilbert Burns. Is the ankle okay? Annie, are you okay? You okay? You okay, Annie? I don't know if it's okay. I don't know. I mean, that one's still an embedded. It looks all poofy, but then the background view, it looks fine. And then he had that ginger step off the scale at the pre-fight weigh-in stare-down thing. I don't know how good it is. I'm going to assume it's 100%. And I had Bilal Muhammad at the start of the week. So do I change the pick? I don't know.
Are you going to?
No, I'm not. No.
Okay. I have a really hard time with this fight. And the hardest thing to predict is, who does the 5-round atmosphere help? Because I feel like your initial gauge is to say Bilal Muhammad, right? He's the higher volume fighter. He's going to go for a lot more takedowns. But we have seen Gilbert Burns in 5-round atmospheres before, and I wouldn't say his cardio falters any major ways. Yes, he does get tired like anybody will, but normally it's due to his very high output in fights and less so due to just the 10 more minutes in the fight. So I don't think Gilbert Burns is just necessarily going to lose those last 2 rounds if it does go that far. And I do think Gilbert Burns has the much higher chance to get a finish in this fight. He has insane power in his hands, but he's able to land his hooks. He has a great body kick too, and I do think his kicks in general are quite underrated. I don't like it when he goes for that spinning body kick. It never seems to land ever, so I hate it when he does that, but I do like the fundamentals out of Gilbert Burns. And he's the guy we always said, every part of his game looked really good for the longest time. He's a very aggressive grappler. He's a very strong wrestler. He's not one of these jiu-jitsu guys who has trouble taking his opponent to the ground, but he could never put it all together. And then he moved up to welterweight, and guess what happened? He was finally able to put it all together. So if he's able to go out there, hurt Bilal with a big shot on the feet, maybe get a guillotine win or a submission win, I wouldn't be surprised. But Bilal Muhammad's shown a lot to me in his last few fights, being sort of this 5-round fighter in the welterweight division. I know they might not be the most aesthetically pleasing performances, you know. He's not like Max Holloway, who's was just like a guaranteed fight of the night. But Bilal's going to go out there and just fundamentally you to death. He has great cardio. He's going to be in your face. The threat of the wrestling is there enough to where I don't think he's going to go out there and shoot a lot of takedowns against Burns, but I don't think it's a case of the floor is lava against Burns. I think Bilal can at least scramble a little bit and have some success. I'm just really excited for this fight, though, and I'm happy we're getting a 5-round version of it.
Okay, so let's put ourselves tomorrow, we get this fight wrong, and we lose a whole bunch of subscribers. Like, it'd be absolutely silly. You make your own pick. Go ahead. Gilbert Burns looked amazing his last 2 fights. The Neil Magny fight after a really long layoff after Chimaev, takes the fight down to the mat, ends up getting the submission really quick, just like RDA was able to do. And then he goes out there against Jorge Masvidal, pat, and he's able to go out there and strike quite a bit, and then threaten with the wrestling to the point where, yeah, that's it for Jorge Masvidal, and he's promoting an old Roy Nelson, knocking out a guy who I've never heard of before. So it was an interesting game-bred card that happened last night, but I don't like bare knuckle boxing. You guys found that out the hard way last weekend. So when it does come down to this fight, Matt, I mean, when you do look at this fight, Gilbert Burns, is he a better striker? Yeah, I think so. He throws more kicks that land accurately, and his hands are a little bit crisper. I don't know if they're quicker, but they're crisper.
I think they're close on the field.
When it comes down to a 5-round fight, I do favor a guy like Belal Muhammad. I think he's just a little bit more conservative with some of his output and his energy usage. When it does come down to this matchup, though, Matt, I think Belal Muhammad has good enough defensive wrestling that he can kind of force the action into different positions. That's why I like Belal Muhammad in the fight. If we disagree, we disagree.
If he has a bad ankle, though, then Gilbert Burns is going to win this fight. Yeah. But I do have Belal Muhammad. That's what I'm going to say right now. The pick is Belal. But if he's limping to the cage, and if we all see that his ankle's swollen right before the fight, don't come at me being like, oh, you guys picked Belal Muhammad.
Konstantinos Tizan is saying another 3-9 week. Bud, you tried that in the comment section last time. I went 7-4 and picked a whole bunch of underdogs. So listen, pal, you move on. You move on and you move forward and you look at a main event between Aljamain Sterling and Henry Cejudo. And I think Henry Cejudo, as weird as that press conference was where he kicked, the kid still has a pillow connection. I mean, he still has that guy making him custom pillows. He took it, he kicked it. It's weird. It's just really weird. He's always been a pillow guy. It's weird. But when you look at a guy
like... It's weird your fixation on it.
Well, it's weird that he brings them out whenever he's needed to. But when you look at a guy like Henry Cejudo, it's not like the last 3 years he's been sitting on the couch eating Cheetos. Like, he's been out there training world-class athletes, getting them ready for combat. Look who trained with him. Yuri Prohashka, John Jones, Wei Lee, Devin Figueiredo, some really, really good fighters went and trained with Henry Cejudo. So if you look at a guy like Cejudo, the last 3 years have been spent in the sport. He's got the YouTube channel where he talks about the sport, and I know Aljamain Sterling has the same thing. The only difference is Aljamain's actually been fighting. And if you look at it for Sterling, similar realm, red gloves, similar realm, like Belal Muhammad. A lot of people like to discredit Aljamain Sterling. Both guys only have 3 losses. They do an F-ton of winning compared to losing, and I don't really get it. So if you look at a guy like Aljamain Sterling, look great against Dillashaw regardless of the shoulder. He looked really good against Petr Yan in the second fight.
We can say regardless of the shoulder, but you can't take as much away from that.
No, but again, I can go all the way down through all of these Aljamain Sterling performances and pick out some really good things.
The Pedro Munoz one was the one that proved to me, okay, he's like top level, because he did face adversity. He ate a lot of leg kicks. He ate a lot of power shots, but the volume was able to get him through that fight. We didn't necessarily see all the grappling that we had seen up until that point, and that's where this fight's going to be very fun for me, because Henry Cejudo is a phenomenal wrestler. We have seen that. He's one of the best MMA wrestlers we've really ever seen. He's a former Olympic gold medalist, and it has translated quite well into MMA. But we all know how good of a just pure grappler a guy like Aljamain Sterling is. Petr Yan's pretty good at wrestling too, but guess what happened? He made him turn into a grappler and not just be a wrestler. And when Aljamain Sterling's able to get guys in these grappling sequences on the mat, not many people can beat him, and he normally ends up in very favorable positions. So if he is able to take the back of a guy like Henry Cejudo, it could very much be wraps just after that one position. But on the feet, I have a really hard time with this fight because Aljamain easily could go in there and overwhelm a guy like Henry with his volume, because Henry has gained as a striker throughout his UFC tenure. We all remember he used to be a lot more boxing heavy, and now he's much more of a karate striker. But if Henry is able to use that outside movement and really lure Aljamain Sterling into some of those bigger power shots, it's not that Henry's some big one-shot knockout guy. I'm not trying to say that whatsoever, but he does do a very good job of matching his feet in with his hands and really making guys pay for straight shots down the middle. So it's really going to come down down to, can the overwhelming volume and control of a guy like Aljamain make up for the explosive spurts that Henry Cejudo is going to have?
And we know a guy like Henry Cejudo with the background in striking that he also possesses, in addition to the wrestling of a caliber 2008 gold medalist down in Beijing. But when you look at a guy like Henry Cejudo, when he fights those taller fighters, he tends to have a more upright stance, and it's a little bit different than when he fights the shorter guys. When he fights shorter guys, wider base, tries to anticipate a little bit of their grappling at the same time. So when I look at a matchup like this, I could see Sterling getting ahead with some of the volume round 1, round 2, Cejudo gets into it round 3, round 4, and then we have a really close 5th round, and everybody's sitting there going, who won 48-47? I do like Aljamain Sterling in the matchup. At Fight Night Picks over here in the YouTube community tab, 57% going with the returning Henry Cejudo. It's almost 3 years to the day since his last time out. Cigarettes and alcohol. We're talking about the fight against Dominic Cruz, who's off of a long layoff, if I'm not mistaken, of his own at that point. So this will be a really good fight because Cejudo at the start, a little bit slow against Moraes, and then he got himself right back into it, finished him, and then sent Marlon just packing. Poor Marlon. And again, against Dominic Cruz. So now Cejudo gets to step up against a world-class, like, at his peak of his powers, Aljamain Sterling. And I know Sterling was the last one to weigh in yesterday.
He was.
He's
huge for the weight class.
Yeah, 134 was what Sterling came in at. So I know we're split on this one, and I know the fans are kind of split over there in the comment section, but this is a big-time matchup, too.
Oh, yeah, because if Henry Cejudo wins this fight, he's one of, like, the top 10 fighters of all time, probably.
Yeah, Gregory Stern, repping the Sox. We love it. You saw it last week, but this is the Players Weekend. This is the Dirty Craig Kimbrell. And, I mean, is he doing it over with the Phillies? It's not going that great. Are the Red Sox playing the Phillies today? Yes, they are. And the Jays are playing the Pirates, and that's a big...
Yoshida, big fan of Bryce Harper.
20-13, the Pirates. 19-14, the Blue Jays. Big matchup you didn't think you were looking forward to. Fight Night Picks question mark kicks, though. It's not all about the old baseball.
Start
it's
from
about
the bottom.
Yeah, we start from the bottom, we go up to the top, and we're talking MMA. You're tuning in, and we appreciate the likes and the super chats throughout the show. Malone Hearts is still showing up there. Louis-Pierre Dion saying, let's get into it. Matt, when it comes down to the first fight on the card,
I have Claudio.
Claudio Ribeiro is a destroyer of worlds. I don't have any confidence in him in any of his fights because I don't know any, I don't like his grappling, and Joseph Holmes has good grappling. I'm not hot on the weight miss by Holmes. I still have Claudio Ribeiro, but this is a tough one.
Remember the tryhards on those Dance Dance Revolution machines at the mall growing up? How bad would Claudio F one of those? It would shake off the ground if he was on it.
I just want to go see the second to last Harry Potter movie. Get off the Dance Dance thing. All right, Matt. Hawes taking on Aliskerov. I'm going with Philadelphia Phil Hawes.
I have Aliskerov.
He's actually representing New Jersey's Phil Hawes. Braxton Smith taking on Parker Porter. Going with Parker Porter.
I'm going to take Parker Porter.
Owns his own gym.
Good for him.
Yeah, a lot of fun there. Matt, Marina Rodriguez taking on Virna Jandiroba. Going with Marina Rodriguez.
I have a really hard time with this fight, but I do have Marina in the matchup.
All right. Craig Hart's sidekick, no dice. We got to get ready for the fights that are tomorrow. Khaos Williams taking on Rolando Bedoya. Going with Khaos.
I also have Khaos.
Kalen Khaos, the Ox Fighter Williams. Both of us with him. Matt, Kenny Nzechukwu taking on Devin Clark. I'm going with wrestlers today.
I've got Kennedy. I like him in the matchup.
Devin Clark. Dober's taking on Frivola. Give me Frivola.
Give me Drew Dober.
Frivola. Charles Jourdain. Matt, you will bat Crone Gracie, and I'm going with Charles Jourdain.
I like Al Jourdain in the matchup, but I don't think either one of these guys is ever going to fight for a UFC title. Let me get that clear right now.
When Ian McKillop and his partner were coming up for the name of the gym that Charles Jourdain's training out of, did they look like, I know they're like Pointe Claire, Verdun area, did they go, you know what, the Habs are down the way, let's get into a Donnybrook Boxing. Great name for a gym, Donnybrook Boxing, where Jourdain trains out of. Both of us going with Jourdain. Matt, Evloev taking on Lopez, going with Evloev.
I've got Evloev.
Movsar Evloev. John Anik loves to call his fights. Jessica Andrade taking on Yan Xiaonan. I'm going with Andrade.
Great fight, but give me Yan Xiaonan.
All right, then we move into the co-main event of the evening. Boo! Going with Bilal Muhammad.
I like Bilal Muhammad in the matchup, too.
All right, and Matt, in the main event of the evening, Aljamain Sterling versus Henry Cejudo. I'm going with and still.
Give me the king of cringe in the return. I don't think his title run was ever really given the credit it deserved, because Henry Cejudo, just
quick.
based off his skills, is one of the better fighters of all time, though, right? He's got wrestling, he's got grappling, he's got striking. He really does have everything you look for when you look for a world-class mixed martial artist. So if he's able to return and beat a guy like Aljamain Sterling, that's really going to show a lot kind of legacy-wise, even though we don't talk about that a lot on this channel. But this should be a great fight. I do have Cejudo, though.
Red Rover. Send Henry over. Matt, coming up next weekend, you know it, you love it. Rosenstrike Almeida in the main event at heavyweight.
ABC4?
You have, what's that?
Isn't it, yeah, UFC on ABC4?
I don't know, it could be.
I think so.
You got Smith taking on Johnny Walker in the co-main event of the evening. It is a big fight night card. They've actually put together a pretty darn good one.
Ian Gary, Janda Rodriguez is on that. That'll be a good fight.
Yeah, the main event's a little bit of an odd one.
The co-main event makes up for it, though. Again, that is a main event quality type of fight. Like, that could be on the main card of a pay-per-view and nobody would bat an eye whatsoever. People would be excited.
And cross your fingers and your toes. That video should come out late tomorrow night. Like, it'll probably be really late if it comes out then. If it doesn't, I'll drop it like early Monday afternoon. So you have a long extended guarantee from me there, but you'll get a video coming out in the next couple of days on that one. Enjoy the card coming up today. UFC 288, some big fights out there. You can find us at Fight Night Picks, Instagram and Twitter as well. Make sure you check out all the videos here on the channel, including the Crone Gracie keeping score, the Jiu-Jitsu Magician returns, the big fights that are coming up, and yeah, you're gonna want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.